You know, I've been a high school principal for a long time, 25 years in education, 12 of those as the head of this school right here in suburban Chicago. And I'll tell you this, you think you've seen it all, right? Fights, pranks, senior skip days, even a couple of fire alarms pulled just before finals week. But there was this one day that almost brought this whole place to its knees. And honestly, I still get chills when I think about it. Not because of the fight itself, fights happen, kids are kids, but because of what came after. The way a single post on social media, well, it almost tore apart everything we had built here. Everything. And I had a choice to make, either duck my head, play it safe, or stand up, face the fire, and show our school's true character. And that day changed how I look at this job, and honestly, how I look at myself as a leader. But hey, let me back up for a second. My name's Mike Patterson. Been working in public education here in Illinois most of my life. Started as a history teacher, worked my way up, now principal of a good old public high school in the Chicago suburbs. We're not some fancy prep school, not a rough inner city place either. We're just a regular school with good kids, great teachers, parents who care. It's a school for life, you know what I mean? And that's something I take a lot of pride in. Now, the story I'm about to share, this isn't one of those polished success stories you hear at conferences or see in some glossy education magazine. No, this is real life, messy, complicated. There were moments I didn't know if I was doing the right thing. Moments I thought, man, this could be the end of my career if I screw this up. But you know what they say, pressure reveals character. And that day, it sure revealed mine. So stick with me here, because if you're an educator, a parent, or even just someone who cares about kids in schools, I think this story might just hit home for you. And who knows, maybe it'll even change how you see things too. And hey, before we dive in, if any of this speaks to you as we go along, go ahead and hit that like button, leave a comment down below, or subscribe if you haven't already. I'm always curious to hear other folks' perspectives, especially from fellow educators out there. Okay, so ready? Let me take you back to 2018, to the day that almost ruined everything. I guess if we're going to talk about that day, it helps to know a little bit about who I am and how I ended up sitting in this office. Like I said, my name's Mike Patterson, born and raised right here in Illinois, not too far from where I work now. Grew up in a regular middle-class family. My dad was a mechanic, mom worked part-time at the local library. We weren't rich, but we had what we needed. And my parents, they really valued education. My mom always said, school isn't just a place you go, it's where you figure out who you are. That stuck with me, I guess. When I went off to college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. But I always loved history, stories, the lessons, how the past shapes who we are. So I got my degree in history and secondary education. Thought I'd be a teacher, maybe coach basketball on the side. And honestly, those first few years in the classroom, man, they were some of the best of my life. There's something about seeing kids get it, that light bulb moment. It's hard to beat. I coached JV basketball too, late nights, bus rides home, that pizza after the games. Wouldn't trade those memories for anything. But you know how it goes, after a while, folks start encouraging you to take on more. I moved up to department chair, then assistant principal. Before I knew it, I was the principal here. 12 years now, and even after all that time, I still feel like a teacher at heart. I spend as much time in classrooms as I can. I know my students by name, or at least I try to, and I've always believed that a good school isn't about test scores or fancy buildings. It's about people, relationships, the way a place feels. Our school, we're what you'd call a good neighborhood school. We're not fancy, but we've got heart. Our kids come from all kinds of backgrounds, working families, single parents, new immigrants, you name it. And our staff, some of the best people you'll ever meet. Teachers who care, coaches who go the extra mile, secretaries who know every kid's birthday. The kind of place where people look out for each other. That's the school I've always tried to build. My leadership style? Well, I'm not much of a top-down guy. I believe in trust. I believe in listening. I believe that if you respect your staff and your students, if you treat them like human beings, not numbers, They'll rise to the occasion, and for the most part, they do. I've always kept an open door. Kids know they can come talk to me. Parents know they'll get a straight answer. I've got 2 kids of my own. My daughter was in college back then. My son's still in high school, so I know what it's like on both sides of the desk. In that perspective, it matters. So yeah, that was the world I was living in. A good school, good people, a job I loved even on the hard days. And then, well, 2018 happened. That one fight, that one post, and everything changed. Funny how fast things can turn, right? That morning started like any other. I pulled into the school parking lot just after 7:15 a.m., sun low over the rooftops of our brick buildings, and I remember thinking how quiet everything seemed before the students arrived. In my office, the aroma of fresh coffee was already filling the air. Ms. Ramirez in the cafeteria had dropped off a cup for me, just like she always does, and I was going over the day's schedule, checking off meetings with teachers and planning to pop into Mr. Thompson's AP history class to see how his new module was going. At around 7:45, my assistant principal, Carla, knocked softly at my door and said, "Mike, there's an issue in the West Wing hallway. 2 juniors got into it before first period." My heart skipped. Fights aren't normal here, but I told Carla I'd be right there. I grabbed my jacket and headed down the main corridor, passing lockers still half closed, posters for the spring musical fluttering against the walls. By the time I reached the West Wing, I could hear raised voices. A small crowd of freshmen and sophomores had gathered near classroom 212, leaning against the lockers, phones out. I could see Tyler and Marcus, the 2 juniors, standing face to face, red in the cheeks, fists clenched. Tyler's coaches had warned me before that he'd been getting frustrated on the football field. Marcus had struggled socially since his family moved here mid-year. As I approached, a teacher on duty, Ms. Jenkins, waved me over and whispered. It escalated fast. They were shoving each other in seconds. Immediately I stepped between them, kept my voice calm but firm. "Guys, let's step aside now." I guided them into the small conference room next to the hallway. On the way, I noticed other students filming. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. This wasn't just another hallway scuffle. Inside the room, Tyler's eyes were darting to his phone in his pocket. Marcus's shirt was untucked, collar torn. Carla shut the door and I asked each to sit. My tone was measured. "Look, I want to understand what happened," and as they began to explain, their voices shaking, I sensed the tension wasn't just about a bump in the locker-lined hall. But I had to keep it professional. I listened, took notes, called for our school counselor and safety officer to join us. By 8:05 a.m., we had separated the boys and sent them each to separate supervised holding areas. I stepped out to check my phone and saw a string of text messages from concerned parents, some worried, some angry. Before I could put my phone away, my assistant called again. "Mike, there's a Facebook post going around. A mom says we're ignoring bullying, that we let it happen." My pulse quickened. She'd posted a screenshot of someone's video of the fight, along with a caption accusing our school of covering up bullying incidents. In that moment, the peaceful morning had shattered. I looked out the window at students now filing into classrooms, unaware that within minutes our community would be talking more about that video than about math tests or basketball tryouts. There was a trigger. I could feel it, a spark that could ignite into something much bigger than 2 angry juniors. I took a deep breath, thinking of my own kids, my daughter off at college who'd texted me a joke that morning, my son waiting for me to drop him off after school for practice, and I realized this was about more than reputation. It was about every kid who walks these halls and expects to be safe, heard, respected. At 8:15, I headed to the media center to pull up that Facebook post on our school's computer, ready to face the storm before it even hit. And right then, as I stared at the post and the dozen comments piling up, I knew the real work was just beginning. That's when everything started to spiral. I'd barely clicked through the first dozen angry comments on that Facebook post when my phone buzzed again, this time a text from my superintendent asking for an urgent update and whether the district PR team should step in. My heart sank. Then Carla popped her head in, voice low but urgent. A local news crew just showed up at the front gate asking for comment. Suddenly, the hallway scuffle had become a suburban media circus. I felt my chest tighten. Man, this wasn't part of the plan. I'd intended to handle this quietly, meet with the families, gather facts, set up a mediated conversation, and launch our anti-bullying initiative with students at the center. But none of that mattered if we were already on camera in front of our doors, cameras rolling, news anchors peppering us with questions we weren't ready to answer. Inside, I'd been preparing for a careful, transparent response. Outside, reality was careening off the rails. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, word of the fight and the Facebook post had spread like wildfire. Teachers I passed in the hall gave me uneasy glances. I could almost feel their unspoken question. Can he handle this? My own son, who attends the school, pinged me on text, "Dad, is it true they're saying you ignored the fight?" I could taste the stress rising in my throat. What was supposed to be a manageable PR hiccup had morphed into a full-blown reputational crisis within minutes. To make matters worse, the parents of one of the boys, both high-profile community members, demanded a meeting with me immediately, threatening to schedule a separate press briefing if I didn't act fast. Their voicemail left no doubt. They wanted accountability, and they wanted it now. Back in my office, I tapped out a rapid email to our district legal counsel, trying to balance transparency with caution, no admissions of liability, but also no stonewalling. I drafted a short statement. Our school takes student safety extremely seriously. An investigation is underway. We are committed to supporting both students, blah, blah, blah. Even as I typed, every word felt hollow. I knew parents wouldn't accept a boilerplate statement, and the community wouldn't buy a PR response. Trust was slipping through my fingers. I glanced at the clock, 8:45 a.m., and realized we were less than half an hour into the school day. By lunchtime, this could be front-page news. Then came the bombshell. Carla interrupted again. "There's another video, looks like someone filmed the fight from a different angle and it's gone viral on Instagram." I clicked over and saw it, jerkily shot, but clear enough. The caption called the school complicit in a cover-up and tagged the school's account. I felt a wave of nausea. The narrative had taken on a life of its own, and it was painting us as villains. My phone buzzed with back-to-back notifications, concerned parents, outraged community leaders, even a tweet from a local reporter promising follow-up at 5. My mind raced. Do I shut down social media on campus? Do I invite the press in for an open forum? Do I reach out publicly to the families involved? Each option carried risks. Censoring social media could look oppressive. An open forum without clarity could descend into chaos. Reaching out to families without full facts risked misinformation. The dilemma was clear. Protect our students' privacy and dignity, or satisfy the public's appetite for transparency. And there was no right answer. As I sat there, palms sweaty on the desk, I realized my staff was watching too. Morale was fraying. Whispers in the teachers' lounge were already blaming me for not acting swiftly enough. Some teachers wanted me to suspend both boys immediately. Others argued for a restorative approach. My usual democratic, collaborative style felt helpless against the mounting pressure. On one side, the legal team warning me to say as little as possible. On the other, worried parents demanding full disclosure. I took a deep breath, straightened my tie, and knew I had to make a call right then, before it got any worse. But which path to take? Silence, transparency, or something in between? My watch said 8:53 a.m., and it felt as though the next few minutes would define not only how this day ended, but the very character of our school community. It all came to a head just before lunch, and man, I never saw it coming so fast. One minute I was wrestling with the legal team's cold-blooded advice, "Keep it tight, Mike," they said, and the next minute I was staring down a packed media center that felt more like a gladiator arena than a schoolroom. News cameras lined the back wall, lights blazing, microphones pointing at me like accusatory fingers, and behind me the parents of both boys sat on folding chairs, eyes locked on every twitch of my expression. My heart pounded so loud I thought everyone would hear it. I ran through in my head the words I'd rehearsed. Student safety is our priority, investigation ongoing, commitment to transparency, but none of it felt real. Then the superintendent's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Remember, no admissions." Great, as if I could sound sincere on cue. I took a breath, stepped up to the podium, and looked out at the sea of faces, some sympathetic, some furious, some already filming with their phones. I cleared my throat and said, "Good morning. Thank you for coming on such short notice." That friendly tone felt like a lie. A parent shouted from the front row, "Why didn't you stop it sooner?" And a wave of murmurs rolled through the room. I froze for a fraction of a second, then decided to lean in, to drop the script. "Look, I get it," I said, voice a notch hoarser than I'd planned. "Nobody should see kids hurt each other in these halls. And I take full responsibility for making sure it never happens again." The room went silent, like I'd just dropped a bomb. The reporters scribbled furiously, camera lights flicked, and I felt sweat trickling down my back. Then, from the side door, Carla burst in with a stack of printouts, the transcript of the boys' interviews with our counselor, showing both sides of the story. I held them up and said, "I want you all to see how seriously we're treating this. We're listening to Tyler, listening to Marcus, and we will get to the bottom of what allowed this to happen." For a moment, I thought I'd bought us some breathing room. But then one of the moms, Marcus's mom, stood up so fast her chair scraped across the floor. She was in tears, voice cracking. My son felt cornered, isolated. How's that being heard? I felt a lump in my throat. Under the glare of those cameras, I couldn't back away. I walked down from the podium, stood next to her, and put a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry," I said, "truly sorry." That two-word apology shifted something. The other parents leaned forward. Reporters lifted their microphones. I could feel the air thicken. And then, out of nowhere, a freshman wandered in, phone in hand, live streaming the whole scene for her friends at home. I realized the moment had broken free of my control. This was no longer about school policy or PR talking points. It was raw, human, real. I took another breath, looked everyone in the eye, and said, "This isn't just on me, it's on all of us. Our teachers, our staff, our community. So today, we're going to do something different. We're opening these doors. Right now, I'm inviting students, parents, and media to see exactly how we handle conflict. You'll sit in our counseling rooms, our mediation spaces, and hear from real kids about what drives them to fight, to feel bullied, to feel unheard." The gasp that rippled through the room was almost audible. Reporters began arranging their cameras toward the hallway. Parents whispered to each other. In that charged silence, I knew I'd made a choice to tear down the wall between us and them. I'd risked everything, my career, our reputation, to show that accountability isn't a soundbite but an action. And as the first few students began filing in behind Carla's guidance, I saw something shift in their eyes. Curiosity, maybe even hope. That break, right there, was the climax. The moment when it stopped being about a viral video and started being about real people, real stories, and real change. I'll never forget the calm that settled over the school after that intense open doors session. In the days that followed, we held guided tours of our counseling and mediation rooms, inviting parents, students, even the media to see how seriously we took each voice. Tyler and Marcus agreed to participate in our new peer support circle, sharing their story alongside other students who had struggled with conflict or felt isolated. It wasn't easy. There were tears, tense moments, and honest apologies that hung in the air like fragile glass. But it worked. By the end of week 2, you could feel a shift in the hallways. Kids greeted each other differently, teachers reported fewer incidents, and parents started sending emails not to complain, but to thank us for the transparency. The district investigation wrapped up with a recommendation for targeted anti-bullying training, backed by data from our own program, and the local paper ran a follow-up story headlined, "Suburban High School Turns Crisis into Community Triumph." I read it with a mix of relief and pride. Relief because we'd navigated the storm, pride because we'd done it together. For Tyler, the program became a turning point. He joined a leadership team for our new student-led workshops and even spoke at the school assembly about how feeling heard changed his outlook. Marcus, who had once felt invisible, found a mentor in one of our counselors and now volunteers as a peer mediator, helping younger students work through conflicts before they escalate. Watching them grow reminded me why I got into this profession in the first place. As for me, I learned a lesson I still carry with me. When you choose openness over cover-up, Empathy over ego, you build trust that no bulletproof statement can match. My team rallied around the changes, coming up with new ways to encourage dialogue, weekly lunch and listen sessions, anonymous suggestion boxes, even a student staff committee that meets monthly. Our year-end surveys showed record-high feelings of safety and belonging, and I saw teachers breathing easier, too, knowing their principal wouldn't shy away from tough issues. Looking back now, I realized that crisis was our catalyst. It forced us to confront weaknesses we'd underestimated and gave us the chance to prove that a school isn't defined by its mistakes but by how it responds to them. That's the end of this chapter. Our school emerged stronger, more connected, and ready to face whatever comes next. So here's my question for you. When was the last time you saw someone step up with real courage instead of hiding behind words? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories, too. I remember driving home that evening with a quiet in my chest I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the relief of "we made it through" or the pride of a job well done. Although both were there, it was something deeper, almost like my whole view of leadership had shifted under my feet. I got home, and my wife noticed my eyes weren't as tired as usual. They had a light in them, as if I'd rediscovered why I chose this path in the first place. That night, I lay in bed replaying every moment, the shouts in the hallway, the glare of camera lights, Marcus's mother's tears, the gasp from the crowd when I invited everyone into our process. I felt raw, vulnerable, but also more alive than I had in a long time. Over the next few weeks, I caught myself smiling at small victories, a student stopping by my office just to say thanks, a teacher sending me a quick text to share an idea for our new program. Even the superintendent acknowledging that our approach had become a model for other schools. Yet, alongside that warmth, there was a new layer of caution. I realized how quickly trust can dissolve, how fragile reputations are, and how much work it takes to build genuine connection. It taught me humility. No amount of experience could have prepared me for that day. But it also taught me courage, that stepping into the hardest moments, admitting uncertainty, and choosing openness can change the narrative more than any polished statement ever could. On a personal level, I felt more present, more tuned into the little conversations in the hall, the glances from a struggling student, the side comments from colleagues who needed a kind word. I found myself pausing before a meeting to breathe and remember that at the heart of every policy, every email, every press release, there are real people with real stories. And that perspective has stayed with me long after the headlines faded. Looking back now, I see that the aftertaste of that crisis was bittersweet. Bitter because it exposed parts of our school community and myself that I wish I'd noticed sooner. Sweet because it led to deeper bonds, tougher conversations, and a renewed sense of purpose. It reminded me that sometimes the biggest lessons don't come in calm waters, but in the storms we dread most. And for me, that's a lesson I carry into every school day, every meeting, every decision. How about you? When was the last time a challenge reshaped the way you lead or live? I think the biggest thing I took away from that whole experience is that true leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about showing up when things fall apart and being willing to admit you don't have them. I learned that vulnerability can be a strength. When I dropped the scripted statements and spoke from the heart, people saw me as human, not just the principal. I realized that trust isn't built in calm moments, but in the turbulence, the instant you decide not to hide behind policies or press releases, but to invite others in, to share the mess and work through it together. I also discovered that listening, really listening to every voice, even the hard, uncomfortable ones, can lead to solutions you'd never imagine on your own. That fight, that viral post, the glare of the cameras, it felt like chaos at first, but it became the catalyst for real change because I chose openness over cover-up and empathy over ego. These days, I remind myself before every tough decision, how can I stay honest? How can I bring people into the process instead of shutting the door? And when I see those answers in the hopeful faces of students and staff, it reminds me that the most powerful lessons often come from our biggest challenges. After that whirlwind of a week, something shifted not just in our school but in me, and in the way people talked about our little suburban high school. Word spread through the district, at state conferences, even among principals in neighboring counties. You've got to hear what Mike did when things went sideways. I'll admit, Being called a model of transparency felt a bit strange, since I'd never set out to be an example. I just did what I thought was right. But over the next few months, I started getting invites to speak at workshops on crisis management, to share how we turned a social media storm into a community conversation. Meanwhile, back at school, the story took on almost legendary status among teachers and students. New staff members would peek into my office and ask, "Is this where the magic happened?" And kids would joke, "Hey, Principal P, remember that day you broke the internet?" It became part of our culture, a reminder that we value honesty, that we don't sweep problems under the rug, that real learning often comes from the hardest moments. I haven't faced a crisis exactly like that one since, but I approach every challenge with that same willingness to open the doors, whether it's a budget shortfall, a clash between clubs, or a parent upset about scheduling. I've trained our leadership team to see every conflict as an opportunity for dialogue, and we still hold those monthly lunch and listen sessions I mentioned, where anyone can walk in and speak their mind, no questions off limits. Even our annual back-to-school night kicks off with a short story of what happened in 2018, so new families understand that we're a work in progress, and that vulnerability is part of our strength. On a personal level, I notice it in the way I start my mornings, pausing to check in with Carla and our counselor, asking, "What's the buzz today?" And in the extra time I spend in the hallways, not just to monitor, but to connect. I've gotten more comfortable with not knowing the path ahead, and more curious about listening for the voices that might otherwise go unheard. And every now and then, when I pass Tyler or Marcus in the hall, and they flash me a grin, I realize the ripples from that one day are still moving through our community. It's funny, when you look back and realize a moment you dreaded became the turning point you needed, you carry that confidence into everything that follows. And that, more than any award or headline, is what I'd call a real legacy. You've been with me through every twist and turn of that day, through the shock of the fight in the hallway, the glare of the cameras, and the moment I decided to throw open those doors rather than hide behind a statement. And now, here we are at the end of this story. I hope you've seen that true strength doesn't come from staying safe. It comes from stepping into the hardest moments and trusting others enough to let them in. Every one of us faces conflicts we'd rather sweep under the rug, whether at work, at home, or even in our own heads. But what if the things we fear most are the very moments that could change us and our communities for the better? I want you to think about your own life for a second. What's the situation you've been tiptoeing around, worried about how it will look, afraid if you speak up you might make things worse? Maybe it's a disagreement with a colleague you've avoided. Maybe it's an idea you're scared to share. Or maybe it's an apology you know you need to give, but haven't found the courage. We all have that hallway fight, that moment when our flaws get broadcast for everyone to see. And we all have a choice: hide, deflect, or step forward, own it, and invite others to help fix it. So here's my final question for you. One I'll admit feels a bit uncomfortable to ask. What's the one thing you're most afraid to let people see? And how might your relationships, or your work, or your own peace of mind change if you brought that out into the open? Think about it, and if you're willing, share it below. I'm listening.